All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for being here today for our webinar on retaining and obtaining better cannabis employees. We have a jam-packed, brief session, so I'm going to dive right in. Welcome guests. Thank you to our panelists, sponsors, and participants. While you're seeing a couple of our other panelists sign on, I'm going to do a quick thank you to our sponsors, and then we're going to introduce our panelists. So bear with me for about 60 seconds as we thank Lock Lord Cannabis Group, which consists of skilled lawyers from a cross-disciplinary team. As industry insiders, the team has a deep understanding of the myriad issues facing established marijuana companies, cultivation facilities, dispensary retailers, and a host of other marijuana-related businesses. The Lock Lord firm works collaboratively with clients to navigate the complexities of the booming cannabis industry. Nexum is an agricultural solutions company focused on the design, engineering, and integration of technology for high-value medicinal plants cultivated indoors. They're also our learning partner for a cultivation course being launched in the coming weeks. And our third sponsor today is the MoCan BizCon Expo. Save the date, May 26th, 27, a fantastic series of unique networking events down in Missouri. Learn all about it. You can check out our learning page after this, get the link, etc. And lastly, we're happy to be a part of this Grownin. We're a cannabis learning and news company that provides cannabis education and independent reporting on the industry. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, I would like to dive in. And the way I'd like to dive in is actually by introducing our three wonderful guests. Could we start with Amy Dordick-Dolinsky? Would you please introduce yourself, followed by Gabe Mendoza and Chris Jackson. Amy, to you, please.
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much, Eric, for having me. I'm Amy Dordick-Dolinsky. I'm a business development director at Lucas James Talent Partners. We're an on-demand recruiting firm, and we recruit for all kinds of roles, technical, all other roles, and some in cannabis, in the cannabis industry. I spent, before joining Lucas James Talent Partners, I spent the last 18 months as the chief revenue officer of an MSO, and made my way into the cannabis industry through consulting and business development and recruiting before joining them. I have a long career of human capital consulting and professional services and putting together the right people in the right roles and the right structure. So I'm excited to talk about talent specific in the cannabis industry today.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Amy. We're going to draw on as much experience as possible. Gabe, let's turn to you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Grownin, for having us on this panel today. I'm really excited to talk and share my experiences over what's been a 6-year now. I am the Executive Vice President of Mission Dispensaries. We are a multi-state operator. We have operations in Michigan, Massachusetts, and Illinois. And I have helped to create and train all of our employees, created the training program, and then helped to train the trainers, if you will. And I also helped to create a training platform for the nonprofit that I started, which is Chicago Normal, which has helped train an additional 1,000 minorities on how to gain access into the industry. And we've helped place a couple dozen of those individuals inside of cannabis businesses. And that's something I'm really proud of, and I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, let's turn to you.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Chris Jackson. I am born and raised in Michigan, still in Michigan now. I am part owner of cannabis operations, Sticky Cannabis Operations. So we have 2 retail stores that are currently operating in Michigan with another 4 on the way. We're actually in the process of getting vertically integrated, if you will, and building out a cultivation facility. But I'm also secretary for the board of the National Cannabis Industry Association. So happy to be here.
Great. Well, let's put your the three of your experience, insights, and perspectives to use and dive right into this. So in our previous conversations, and just to set the table for all of our guests, we've talked a lot about the concerns and issues about culture, specifically hospitality and care, social justice and diversity, specifically access, ownership, leadership, and then also skills, kind of hard skills, soft skills versus certifications. And then this idea, this concept of turnover versus really succeeding with training effectively so that we can retain long term. So those are all going to come up in this conversation. And I say those to remind you of our previous conversation. So before we go into, and would one of you, it could be any of you, we probably don't need answers from all three. Could you just start to give us a sense of how HR, human resources, is unique to this industry and a little different from what we see in some of the other industries?
Sure. Do you want me to take that one, Gabe, or do you want to go?
I was going to say, Amy, that's right up the rally.
Okay, sure. So HR, this is a great way to start. You know, depending on the organization, there's really a lot HR can do, because you can have a lot of impact and influence and value creation in a cannabis company. You're forming and creating often a function from scratch, which is really exciting. It's not for everyone. So people who come from organizations, and maybe Gabe and Chris will talk about this too, where things are just humming and running, maybe this isn't for them. Perhaps it's, you know, where you're somebody who loves to mold and shape and create. HR is transforming and moving at a quick pace because of all the regulations. So you have to understand regulations in multiple states if you're an MSO. You know, each state has different HR policies, practices, laws, regulations, employee, you know, regulations. So you really have to be somebody who is like quick on the draw, really fast paced, resilient, persistent, and then somebody who can attract and bring in great talent and set up a talent acquisition strategy to do so.
Yeah, I would piggyback on what Amy's saying, and there is a huge opportunity for individuals who have experience managing HR for companies, large companies or small companies, anywhere in between, to be successful in the cannabis industry, right? Because to Amy's point, you're creating this really from scratch, right? Even the companies like mine that have been around for over half a decade, it's still a brand new industry, right? And so there are still different pillars that these HR individuals have to create for these companies. To Amy's point, though, this industry is extremely fast paced. It moves and changes not only based on operational functionality, but on regulatory changes too, right? And so all of those things have different, it's a different outcome in different states based on those different regulations. And so if you are as an HR professional are looking to get into the industry, just know that this industry is fast paced. It moves and ebbs and flows based on not just what your company desires, but what state regulatory agencies require. But you're able to, there's a lot of runway for success in this industry.
I think that there are, so that's where we get to start out, you know, kind of at a macro level and get more and more nuanced. I think that there's some really unique things about this industry when you consider some of the limitations and restrictions, whether it's banking or insurance, et cetera. When you think about the HR process and creating organizational culture, how does cannabis industry, again, how is it, I want like a little bit more nuance. What's different about the cannabis industry from even the hospitality or the, you know, food service industry in terms of benefits, compensation, other incentives?
So in terms of benefit, Chris, do you want to take this one? Sorry,
no, go ahead, Gabe. I'll go ahead. Finish your thought.
Benefits and compensation, we have been really fortunate to be a company that has been cognizant of the fact that in order to get an employee to be successful in the cannabis industry, they have to have a multitude of different skill sets, right? You have to be proficient in your soft skills, right? You have to at times be someone's counselor, their mentor, their spiritual advisor, their physical advisor. That is hard to come by when you have to make sure that on top of all that, you have a very rigorous standard of not having any sort of operational mishaps, if you will, right? So we are overseen by regulatory agencies that essentially allow for very little slippage, and all of these things in combination make for a very unique individual, right? And so what we noticed at a very early set in our journey was that it really paid to pay these people, right? And so we start them at certainly above what a minimum wage would be in that area. We hire from the area that we're in, right? So we're not bringing folks in from other areas. We're hiring from within as best we can. And we're making sure that when they get to full time, they receive benefits, and those benefits are 80 to 90% paid by us as the employer. And because of that, we've seen really low turnover rates, which is huge, because to try to train someone to get all these nuanced skills, it's a very, very costly thing. So we started at the early onset, paying these people as a good pay, and then offering them incentives in order to keep them here.
Yeah, I'd say by and large, I think that most cannabis companies see the value in paying a little more than what a person would typically get in a different industry, in a different market, and understandably, and I believe that we should, right? Because we happen to have that access to more top line revenue minus the taxes and all of those details. But it's a pretty lucrative industry by and large, right? The thing I think is the kicker is that we're talking about an industry where people, it's a very cultural industry, as are other industries, but it's in this infant stages enough where I don't believe that we've quite tilted over to kind of a corporate structure all the way, right? So there's this quasi that exists between kind of your legacy or historical context of the cannabis industry and the way it's moving to become a more corporately structured industry. And to Gabe's point, what's the balance ultimately, right? And so when he speaks about finding people from within the community in which the store exists, is actually really important, right? Because there's that context of the legacy or historical adaptation that needs to exist because of how young the industry is. The other thing is, it's while we value people who have those skill sets that Gabe alluded to more, it's a new industry, and I think we have a lot of people who want to just try it, right? I mean, we experience, there's a ton of people who just say it's new, automatically, I have an opportunity to make more money. And it's really hard to find the right people when you have everyone, right, wanting to participate in some form or fashion. And so a lot of the people that we hire, and I think I use the word kind of interchangeably, is they have to be entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs within the scope of the job that they're working, right? So they aren't owners necessarily, right? Depending on the structure of the company, but they have to own what they're doing in order to wear as many hats as we expect or we ask people to wear.
So a couple of great points. I actually, Amy, I do want to ask you specifically, as someone who is sourcing talent and supporting organizations with finding talent, is there anything that someone who's learning more about talent in this industry that they should be aware of, some things that are otherwise unique?
There are a couple things, and Gabe and Chris are going to nod their heads. So the payroll systems, a lot of the systems that exist in other industries where you can get ADP or regular payroll systems or 401k systems or regular benefits, some of those don't actually exist in cannabis. There are more new players coming in, so more niche players in banking and payment systems and dispensaries especially. There's more options to pay now, but even a couple of years ago, it was really challenging payment systems. But for employees, a regular 401k plan was really hard to come by. Payroll systems, there's only a few that work in this industry. So some of the benefits and typical systems that exist, in, traditional, I'll call them companies, don't all exist in the cannabis industry. So in fact, I did a survey in 2019, kind of a simple survey of all the kind of corporate roles down to the dispensaries. And at least in what we found, some of the corporate roles were paying a little less than market. So usually, you have the 25th percentile, the 50th, the 75th, in the dispensaries, I'm glad to hear that, that some of the companies are paying well. And I think that's true because that is the customer interaction point. So you want to have great customer care. But in some of the more traditional, like accounting, finance, corporate roles, you may see people at the 50th percentile or a little bit low as far as compensation. So people have to understand there's a trade-off maybe when you're coming into the cannabis industry from more traditional industries, and just be ready for things to change and grow. This industry will catch up with all those systems. It's just not there yet.
Okay, let's use that baseline as a good entry into this. And thank you, all three of you, for sharing some insights. When you think about patterns of people, I mean, you started to get to this. So, Chris, the idea that, and actually both Chris and Gabe talked about this, it matters to have people from a community working in a local dispensary, right? It matters for all sorts of reasons. But can we talk a little bit more about the skill sets, both the soft skills and the hard skills? And Gabe, I'd like to start with you on this one, and then we'll go Chris and Amy again. In this case, Gabe, I want to start with you here because you've really moved up the ladder and you've opened, I think, like 1,020 stores in just a few years. So you've suffered some of that. So share some anecdote and some insight. Don't feel like you have to talk the whole time because I will call on Chris and then Amy and we'll come back to you. But just kind of give us some sense here.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, if you remove those zeros from 1,020 and just leave the 12, that's the number. But yeah, no, there is the skill sets, the hard skills, I'll start with those are very easy to train someone on, right? You can train someone how to count cash, how to effectuate a sale on a point of sale. It's the soft skills that really are what I look for when I'm looking to hire an individual, both from a tactical empathy standpoint and a critical thinking standpoint, right? We look for, and then we train, but we're looking for at least an initial level of critical thinking and tactical empathy. And what I mean by that is we're looking for an individual who actually wants to ask someone questions in order to find out about what can benefit them. And there's plenty of people out there that don't want to necessarily do that. And to Chris's point, you do get a lot of individuals who are coming in who are curious, and the age ranges from 21 to 81, right? And so you're getting a large swath of individuals. It's important to ask questions in which to help understand whether these individuals actually would take the time out of their day normally to just get to know someone deeper than a superficial level, because we are asking these critically engaging questions in order to understand how we can best serve them. And so I'll leave it there, but that really tactical empathy for the purpose of understanding this individual who's in front of you and the next 500 who are going to be in front of you that day is extremely important.
I love that phrase, tactical empathy. I don't think I'm going to repeat it at home, but I think it's a really good phrase for business. Chris, can you share a little bit about what this looks like on the floor in your dispensaries? And if you don't see those things, what do you do? How quick do you take action in this industry versus how patient might you be in a different industry?
Yeah, so in to Gabe's point, I think there is this notion of the fact that, if you have 600 people that visit the store that day, right, you're going to see a couple of hundred people with their own issues, with their own needs, with their own perspectives, right, that you have to formulate a mindset in which, you want to connect with that person, but then you have to forget the person as soon as they leave because there's somebody else coming. And I'll say that I believe that, as Michigan works on a couple of things, so quickly I was a part of the racial task force that gave those 16 recommendations and to the MRA, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. And one of those things was actually certification program and or process, a continual education process, right? For not only operational general business, but from a medical perspective as well. And so I believe that right now we're just relying on our own ability to trust that people can empathize tactfully, to Gabe's point, with the people that they're speaking with on a day-to-day basis. I think that it would help in some ways if there were a continuous education or certification that could occur, because then there could be standard, and then you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about all of the folks who are your hourly employees being the experts at everything, right? Which is kind of the expectation right now. But we've seen a lot of success from hiring folks outside of the hospitality industry, just generally speaking, those who have worked in restaurants and or hotels, because at a minimum, they've interacted with people, customers, consumers, and they've interacted with consumers that either were difficult to deal with because of alcohol, right? They've interacted with people who may be difficult because we're talking about a home away from home, over the course of X amount of days. And so, I think that's kind of built into folks that already think along those lines, which is why I think we've had more success with those types of employees than not. But like I said, I think the closer we get to certification and continuation, I think the simpler it becomes to really define what expectations are, and it's less pressure in a lot of ways on the folks that are working at our establishments.
Thank you, Chris. That's really useful. And Chris and Gabe, I just heard from both of you a lot of focus and intention on what an agent or a bud tender looks like and what some of the expectations about that interaction are like. Amy, do you have any insights on the middle management and senior management in the industry that you can share with us?
Sure. So one of the things as I was listening, and I've gotten to know Gabe and Chris, they're describing what we would call in for the consulting world competencies. And I think it would be really terrific as the industry matures to start putting in place competency-based hiring at all levels. And what I mean by that is just really being more objective and maybe less subjective about how we assess employees, which will be good for the industry. So they're using competencies like intellectual curiosity is really important in these roles. Empathy is a competency. You can measure all these. And so as you go up to sort of mid-level and senior level management, these and more are important. I think also people, again, who have the competencies around adding value quickly, leading, bringing people along, helping to implement and develop. They were both talking about that. I mean, at the ground level, it's hard to hire people in some states because you need an agent card to work in a dispensary, and that's a whole process. And then when you get up to senior, you have to have the ability to, understand across state lines. So really understanding maybe some compliance and regulatory might be in some of the roles. You have to implement structure, people who know how to implement and put in structures, because people do better within some context of a structure, so they know what success looks like, even at the lowest level to the highest level. People want to understand, what does success look like, and then how do I move up in the organization?
It's been a while since I hired for the Grow, but I'm pretty in the mix of how that would work. Essentially, the way in which we identify it now, and if you ask Amy, she'd say, I need to set my game up. But the way in which we do it currently is we have an assessment based on cultivation needs. And so cultivation says, hey, we're going to need X amount of employees. Here are the different positions. We then send that out to our HR department, who will then put these requisitions out on Indeed. And that's just it's a job searching platform. And then we will receive then a flood, very literally, of inquiries for the position. And then we would then have our individuals screen them based on their resume, and then have a phone screening. Now, if we're talking about entry level positions for cultivation, right, the skill sets that you're looking for are vastly different than if you were talking about dispensary, which Eric, you touched upon, right? And so when you're looking for cultivation employees, you're looking for maybe do they have any sort of botany or agricultural experience, But really, ultimately, those entry-level employees are physical. They are working long hours on their feet, lifting things, trimming things. So the first thing you see is, are they physically able to do the job? Have they worked long hours before? Have they worked day shift, night shift, third shift, second shift, right? Some of these grows are 20-day jobs, right? And so seeing their availability for off-hour work, can you do a third shift and be, it's a very weird shift to do. Have you done that before? Can you stand for long times? Can you lift things? And so that's the entry level. And of course, you're always looking to, at least from our position, we're looking to hire from within. So we want to be able to pull people up. And so there is a method to not just saying, okay, we'll take anyone who can lift a heavy box. It's also about, hey, do they fit the kind of culture that we're trying to promote in this company, so that we can then in turn promote them, right? So we want to find that mix. And sometimes you'll get you'll get there and sometimes you won't.
That is a great answer. Chris, before we go into any of that, move on. Keep it moving.
Great
Okay.
answer.
So then
the only thing I would add, Gabe and Chris, I would just ask you, you also need people in those roles who are dependable and responsible, right? You're looking for somebody who's going to be there when you need them and show up on time, and then help others and pitch in. So there's some other soft skills. It sounds like, I know from, some of the experiences I've had, those are some baseline things you can ask questions easily around how have you been, tell me about some consistent performance you had and what managers have said to make sure that in those roles, because, without people in the cultivation centers trimming, you don't have product.
Yeah. Yep. And that goes throughout both, right? I mean, you want on both sides, dispensary, retail, wholesale, you want dependability. There are baselines, to Amy's point, that you want from any employee you get.
So what's so interesting though is, as I was listening to you, you were talking about essential functions. And when you think about literally the way a job description reads and how we post our descriptions as a marketing activity to raise awareness about our companies, and we're trying to bring people in and get the best possible employees, you mentioned a couple of things. There's the obvious essential functions, which are quite different from a grow versus the dispensary. But you also both kind of got back to some of the soft skills, which are all about culture. So finding a good cultural fit, and that's where retaining is really about. We want to retain the people we have. Chris, I want to direct this question to you first, and then we'll come back to Gabe and Amy, which is, are there opportunities for growth inside of Sticky? How do you create an opportunity so that someone who comes on board doesn't have to see, well, I'm just going to be an hourly employee until I don't want to be here anymore?
Yeah, I think one of the first things we try to do with anyone we hire is understand what they want, right? I mean, if we could think that this person would be a really good manager on a shift, but if that person literally just wants to decompress, enjoys the community, and wants to work the front desk, and that's where they want to live, then at least we know they're going to be the best at that position. So the first thing is just understanding what people want ultimately. Now, let's say that there is an opportunity for growth in those folks who are interested in such. The way that we've done it, at least, is everyone starts from the same place. We really don't necessarily, we appreciate more experience, right? And that'll probably get you through the process sooner. But to start with, everyone's going to work the front. Everybody's going to work the front desk to greet customers or patients. As well as kind of processing, right? Certain things. From there, folks are gonna be able to start bud tend or act as agents in this case, right? We've been using the words interchangeably, so they'll have an opportunity to do that. And part of it is the maturity of the person and the cultural fit, right? And I don't mean the cultural fit for the culture in Ypsilanti is going to be 1,000 times different than the culture in Detroit, Michigan, right? Different places, different expectations, different needs. How long has the store been open? All of those things have to be taken into consideration. This ladder, if you will, that allows folks to not necessarily have to move at the same pace, but minimum have to go through the same stages in order to move up within, sticky in our culture.
That's really cool. Chris, I'm sorry. Thank you, Chris, for the specifics on that. I think you gave us a practical sense of pathway. Gabe, I know that it's very important at Mission that people have an opportunity to grow. Do you want to add a different wrinkle on that?
Yeah, I think it depends, and it depends on the life cycle of the dispensary, right? And so if we're starting a brand new dispensary, I can't agree more with what Chris just said, right? Everyone starts, unless there are someone who you're bringing over from another dispensary that you have open, but we don't have any supervisory roles associated with any of the new hires, right? They all start at that initial level. And then you build them up based on their performance there, right? So that you get to see who actually puts the time in. The other thing is it helps to be successful, right? I mean, if you have other dispensaries that you can point to or futures in which, hey, look, we're planning on opening another dispensary. We want to be able to build you guys up and pull you guys up from there. We've had scenarios where we moved management from one state to another based on their how they've been performing at their previous state, right? And so when you have options, it makes it a lot more of a pie in the sky. Hey, I can help you because of the fact that we are being successful. So you put in the work here, and then obviously the proof's in the pudding, right? You actually have to do that once you have the ability to. And so it is helpful to be successful. And it's also exactly to what Chris said earlier, is that you've got to be realistic with these people, right? You have to, one, see where they're at, and two, be honest, right? If you only have one dispensary, your jobs are in a box. There can only be a certain amount of general managers, right? So being realistic with them, if you have, say you have one dispensary and that's all you want to have, you're going to have to continuously be realistic with your people and find ways to help build them up that don't involve a new title, because there's eventually those titles will run out. And so what we've done is you find ways to give them learning opportunities. Maybe it's a class on how to run Excel formats. Maybe it's a class on how to take pictures, right? A photography class. How do you get these people to get to the next stage in their life? And I will keep, if somebody wants to be a dispensary employee their whole life, I'll be happy to train them and to make them that. But if you want to do something else, be honest with me, I'll be honest with you. We'll help each other. And while you're here, you give me your all, and we'll help to grow you up. And so if you want to own another dispensary at the end of the day, or do something outside of this, you have the opportunity to do so.
This is great. Amy, I'd like to direct you to the next question, if you don't mind, unless you're going to say something here.
No, go ahead.
Okay, great. So as I kind of recap and transition, what I hope people will take away from what Chris and Gabe just shared is there's a practical nature of this, there's a reality nature of this, there's an honesty nature of this, and there's an upskilling. And one of the things that really stands out to me is if you have people who are great bud tenders, God bless. That is awesome. And if they want to be in those positions, God bless. That is awesome. Let's not force somebody who's great at what they're doing into something that they may not be great at. And I hear that. And at the same time, let's empower and educate, because this is a rapidly evolving field. And that actually gets to the question that I want to ask Amy, which is, when you look at this and you think about some of the areas in which the expertise hasn't yet caught up to the emerging industry, what areas what niches do you see are going to need to be filled in the coming year or two? And then obviously, Chris and Gabe, I'll ask for your thoughts on this too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to compliment Gabe and Chris, because what they were talking about, which is really important, by the way, is like phenomenal onboarding. They just described great onboarding. And if companies don't have this, they need to, because this is one of the things that people will ask if they're, interviewing, even like, tell me about, what my first 90 days might look like. It sounds like they've got that nailed, because that is talking about culture and your role in the bigger picture. And here are the opportunities. And here's what our company stands for, our purpose, our mission. Those are really critical things. And to tell you the truth, that's like what you have to do when you're selling these positions, because sometimes when we do recruiting, often we're reaching out to what we call passive candidates. So people who aren't looking at the dispensary level and sometimes at the processing and cultivation level. You can often just post and you'll almost get a deluge of resumes because people get into this and would very happily get in from the ground floor. But in some of the middle management or even corporate positions, you're going to start seeing that you need to fill out HR departments, finance departments, procurement departments, purchasing, like some of the more typical, bigger, mid-sized to bigger company functions. And, as they talked about, you go from sort of a broad role when you're in a small company. And I did a presentation last Friday to a bunch of senior execs on tell me about the startup industry and what are emerging industries like is it going to be for me at sort of the C-suite level? And I say, well, if you like to wear 5 hats in a small company, this is for you. But as the companies get bigger, the roles get more specialized. So if you wore 5 hats in the beginning, you'll start to see as the company grows that you'll have to specialize. You might just be in the business development function, or you're just in the HR, or you're just recruiting. And recruiting is going to be more and more important. I mean, as soon as everybody gets more licenses, you're going to see having to sell people on your company and your culture versus another dispensary or another corp, an MSO. So I think you're going to see TA, talent acquisition departments get more about selling the employment brand, or selling the opportunities. Here's where you could start, but look at us. We're going to be in 9 states. You can grow. You might be able to relocate and open stores for us if that's something you're interested in. So I think you're going to see more sophisticated finance people get into the industry because you're going to need people who understand financing. I mean, in the cannabis industry, if you're at a senior level, you might have to deal with your investors and shareholders.
My experience in building a number of businesses over the last couple of decades, and I was thinking about how simply you put it. There's it's the shift from wearing hats to having sophisticated expertise. And Chris and Gabe, you two are probably seeing this in your companies now. Before we transition to a couple other questions, are there any 1 or 2 positions which you're we're going to need to fill these ones in the next year or in the next 2 years, and they don't even exist yet? Anything like that you're seeing on the horizon?
I don't know that they don't exist, but maybe, a lot of companies don't have multiple finance people or HR people, but they're starting to departments out because they're going to be, they're critical once you have multiple states or multiple countries. You really need good, sophisticated people, not only on the typical finance and accounting, but understanding treasury and banking and payment systems. Yeah. And then on the HR side, they touched on it as well, training and development, people who can build training and development programs from onboarding to, specialized training where people want to learn skills maybe that would help them elevate in the organization, like Excel or PowerPoint or Word or, some more, Leaf Logics or some of the more typical systems that you use in the cannabis industry, like ERP systems and knowing how to work with ERP and point of sale systems. There's going to be more need for those skills.
Yeah. Gabe, Chris, anything you're seeing there? And then I'm going to push to the last couple questions.
Yeah, I think Amy hit a really important point on the head, and that's training programs, right? Making it so that you can scale. So I'm taking this conversation with my hat on. If I'm taking one dispensary and turning it into 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, you're certainly going to need to be able to train that. And you as an individual, I know from experience, you're not able to be everywhere at once, right? And so being able to train that, and as you expand, certainly HR, especially accounting, if you want to become a publicly traded company, you better have an army of accountants ready to, file all of the correct paperwork as a publicly traded company would. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
From being private to public. And so those are 3 really big segments that as you're expanding, those will expand as well.
That's great. Chris, do you want to add anything here? Okay, thank you. So we had 2 other questions which actually pick up on the point we're just getting at. One from Stephanie and a kind of follow-up from Renee. And the questions were, what's your suggesting about creating competitive wage scale for the industry for the positions? But also, how do you suggest pay increases are handled, annually more often? And again, we don't have all day for this, but a little guidance would be great. This is hard.
Yeah, so I've done it a couple different ways, and we've evolved as it's happened, right? So it started with, we were giving pay wage increases based on they were intermittent, and it was, you know, ask any HR person that was lighting their hair on fire, right? Hey, this person really deserves it, and I was just like, hey, this person deserves it. We, you know, as we evolve, right? And so we got more sophisticated where now it's on a yearly basis, unless the given state or store hits performance metrics that allows for a 6-month review to be done, right? And so if we're going absolutely bonkers with sales, and we've increased from X to, you know, X 30%, 50%, and increase month over month sales in those 6 months, and I'm just throwing out hypotheticals, but then you're able to then say, okay, hey, look, HR, we believe that this, because you want justification in order to make it even for everyone. And so that's kind of how we do it. So we've done it, we do it at the end of the year. However, if there are performance metrics that are hit before then that would trigger a potential opportunity for individuals to get paid more.
Very good specific answer. Chris.
No, quickly, and Gabe, you know, we may adapt that as we grow from 2 to 6 stores, right? Because when you have 1 or 2 stores, you know, you can be more flexible. The hard part is understanding how to make it even, right? How to do it in a way in which everyone has the same opportunity to perform and then benefit from performance, or not benefit from lack of performance. And so from our perspective, you know, outside of transitioning to different roles, obviously that pay more money. The main thing is for us quarterly to 6 months is when we're typically doing, you know, individual reviews to say, okay, hey, do you feel like you deserve it? Or we've noticed this. We think you probably deserve a bump in this way for these reasons, right? And so we try to initiate that by way of timing, similar to what Gabe was describing, versus intermittently doing it all the time, because there's no way then you can make it an equal process.
Okay, Amy, do you have a brief answer to this?
Yeah, all I was going to say is people talk, so make sure you have pay equity across stores or locations. I mean, that's just, you know, right, kind of simple. Make sure that, you know, at least if you're paying people within a range or whatever, it's consistent. We talk about that as pay equity. Pay equity can mean many things, but yeah.
That's actually a brilliant reminder. Thank you for saying that and reminding everybody on this call that whether we work in different organizations or the same ones, people talk. And that actually gets us to one other question, which was in the chat. And I hate having to cut a webinar when you've got flow, but you know, this is set up as a short webinar, a teaser in a way. Tyler asked a question about how you create trust among your employees. And I actually feel like you three have already indicated how you do that to some extent. This is going to be our last question, so I'm going to add something onto it. So this is how you create trust with you so that they feel that justice, diversity, and access in your organization. So how do you create trust and give that opportunity for anybody, whoever they may be, to have a legitimate seat at the table? And let's start with Chris, then we'll go Gabe, and we'll close with Amy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I would say honesty and flexibility are 2 big things, right? And Gabe alluded to it a little earlier too. But there's something to be said for a sense of honesty with regards to what's available, what's possible, what's not possible, what expectations are. Are we over communicating, right? Those are, can you guys hear me okay? I feel like
I think you're frozen. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Yeah, we got you. We got you.
I'm back.
We can hear you.
Guys,
fine,
sorry about that.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
So there's something.
Okay, now you're actually frozen, Chris. Gabe, let's turn to you in the interest of time. He said honesty and flexibility was what he got before we lost
So
him.
the number, from what I found from experience, the best way to create trust with them is to be present there with them and going through this. So if you're overseeing multiple dispensaries, you have to be in that store in order to gain trust. If you're giving a suggestion to maybe a general manager that you would have, who's obviously over there all the time. Then the next thing is continuous communication in a way that is actually schedulable, right? So I have, and this might sound crazy, but I have my GMs schedule a one-on-one with each of their employees once a month. And if you, it might seem like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of time, but because they're talking on a consistent basis, and I haven't scheduled out for the whole year, the consistency of, I know I'm going to be able to talk to this person at this time, and maybe, you know, if we have to move the time, that's fine, but it is consistent communication where they feel like they have a time guaranteed to talk. It makes it so that they are way more open. That was one of the things that really helped me and my team get to, because that's the most important part, is getting your employees to trust you. Honesty is, of course, if you're going to say something, you've got to do it, right? And so if that, to Eric's part, question about community or justice and economic justice as well. If you're going to say you're going to do something for the community, you're going to have to do it, because like Amy said, people talk, right? I mean, if you don't hold your word, you're going to be screwed, because they're, like I said, it's one little box. They have nothing to do with talk, and they're doing it all day. And so being honest with them, being forthright, scheduling one-on-ones on a monthly basis for every single employee is what I would recommend.
Wonderful. Amy, any wisdom here to close this?
Well, I'm going to close this out with one of the best books I've ever read, one of the best business books I've ever read. And anybody who knows me already knows what I'm going to say, because I often talk about this book. It's called The Trusted Advisor. It's 20 years old, and it holds up perfectly today. And it's everything they said. So the Trusted Advisor talks about the trust equation. And I love this. So the trust equation is, I had to look it up because I wanted to be sure, credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. And that all is, it's like a formula over self-orientation. So if I'm credible, reliable, I create intimacy, meaning professionally, like I'm transparent, people I care, I'm present, like they said. And that is all over the self-orientation. Anybody who's more like about themselves, like people, you know, you talked about being present and listening, like people pick that up so quickly. So this trust equation, I think, is genius. I really live by being a credible, reliable, transparent, and caring individual, much more over my self-orientation. And I think that, you know, as these are forming organizations, cannabis companies are forming and creating and evolving, this is a really important piece of it, creating trust within your organization.
This is wonderful. I would, if I had my way about it, I would be on a call with you three for a much longer time, and I have a feeling several of our audience members would as well. Unfortunately, this is the time we have today. I'm going to do a kind of a formal wrap here. Chris, thank you very much for joining us from Sticky. Gabe, thank you for joining us from Mission. Amy, thank you for joining us and representing a number of organizations who you've served and supported. Really, the three of you are experts in the field. We don't take it for granted that you made time to share your insights and expertise with us today. We sincerely appreciate it. I can't wait to get on another call with you. It may be as soon as tomorrow, but thank you for now. To all of our guests, thanks for being here today. Obviously, some really important threads which we're just beginning to get at. So if you have additional thoughts, questions, let us know, and we'll try to respond. We do have a learning page that's up on this. We'll include the video after. We'll put a link to all of the wonderful training courses that we offer. If you do care about getting your team trained, we will also put a link to the Trusted Advisor up there. And then I just want to say again, thank you to Lock Lord for sponsoring, and to Nexum and to Mobis Expo. Really grateful to be here with you all. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.